Hey everyone. Today we're going to talk about value. We're going to talk about highlight, light, shadow, reflective light, core shadow, and cast shadow. And we are going to do just a little exercise. I'm going to start with a sheet of my good 11 by 14 mixed media board. I know we've been doing a lot of our exercises in our sketchbook, but for this one I want you to do it on the better paper so that we can see how the materials work on a better quality surface. Okay, so I'm going to divide my paper into 4. So I have 11 inches, do 5.5, 5.5. If you want to tear your paper down like we did for one of our other exercises, when we did our contour study, so that you have 4 little individual ones, you can. Or you can choose to just divide it visually. This is 7 out of 14. Okay. So in these 4 sections, we are going to start with our vine charcoal because it's forgiving, and we're going to draw some really basic shapes to start, because we are hopefully now understanding that if we can really handle these basic shapes, then as we compile them and put them together into other forms, we can create complicated things like the human figure, a car, a house, a landscape, and so forth. So we're going to start with a circle. We practiced drawing circles earlier. If you want to trace one, you can. If you want to try and free-form one like we did before, or if you use that gridding system where we broke it up, you can do that. So we're going to do a circle. We are going to do a little cube. We're going to do a little pyramid. Oops. And we will do a little cylinder. Okay, so before we start rendering these with charcoal, I want us to have these sit on a ground plane. If we just try to render the object without anything around it, it's a lot more challenging. So we're going to do it this way to start. I'm just going to run a line behind all these little figures, just really simple, to start to create space. By doing that simple act of connecting a line behind the circle, it starts to make it feel like it's sitting in a location. So I'm going to do the same here. And then again on these. I'm going to do this one on an angle and make it look like it's sitting on a table. making sure it's parallel to the edge of my picture plane. So there's a little bit of a value shift there. To make it look like it's sitting in the corner of a room. And I should do this one simple. Okay, so what I'm about to show you is not always the case, but it's a good rule of thumb, is to start with the negative space, the behind, the boring, and then work your way up to the subject or the figure so that it sits up close. Also, when we're working on white paper with dark pigment, it's often good to start dark to light, because the paper is going to be our light, so we have to leave it behind. Okay, so I'm going to start with my compressed charcoal. Here's our little kit again. And we have these charcoals here, and then we also have this super dark pastel compressed. But I'm going to use one of these, and I have it broken in half. We can try this again later with slower materials like graphites or the narrow pencils or ebony pencils, but this is just a really fast way to make something sit in space. So dark to light, negative to positive, and also big to little. So I'm going to start with this area because it's one of the biggest in this little section. And when I lay my pigment in there, I'm going to try and do it in such a way that it's kind of complicated, that I'm thoughtful about my mark making. So I could do something really fun and hectic in the background, like some of our earlier studies. I could try to do something really atmospheric, but I'm just going to keep these pretty simple. So I'm going to take my charcoal and I'm going to lay out my background space. I'm using the charcoal on its side. I'm trying to be fairly thoughtful about my mark making. And then I'm going to try here to make like a value scale where it's darker and gets lighter as it moves across, so that it has some complexity. I'm going to close the door to my studio. My children are playing dominoes. Hang on 1 second, I'm sorry. Super loud. Sorry guys. Okay. Quarantine studio. So I'm going to do a little bit of a light value back here. And I'm doing it just with pressure. And the key to making something look representational, like it's sitting in space, is to try to get rid of these harder edged outlines. So we'll keep working on that as we go. I'm gonna, because I have a circle, I'm gonna think about my mark making and try to just do it in opposition to that circle and make it kind of a vertical mark. Just so it has a little bit of complexity. I want this darker, so I'm going to shift to a different kind of charcoal in my kit just to see if I can make it darker. It might be a little softer. Yeah. I want to kind of try to fill in some of that tooth on the picture plane, the tooth of the paper. The charcoal's a little messy, but it's so fast. We can do this again, like I said, with some graphite, but it'll go slower. I liked some of these earlier kind of frenetic marks. I'm gonna kind of add a few in here. I'm really trying to dig in those darks. tap off my charcoal here. Go. Okay, so negative up to the positive, dark to light, big to little, but this is probably my next big area and probably will be my darker area. We're just kind of making this up. If you need to set up a little still life, and I will put in the reading some pictures that you can follow where there's some light sources, but these are just kind of make-believe. But since this is dark over here, I'm going to put my cast shadow this way. When we do these cast shadows, they aren't just one solid dark usually. They often have some complexity within them as well. And they're typically darker as they get close to the subject because it's like the core of the cast shadow. So I'm gonna, again, I have my charcoal on the side. I'm gonna lay this in pretty dark right up near the ball and then I'm gonna feather it out. Sometimes you'll see people, and it's possible to do it, where you can color or render with your erasers. You can move the pigment around with your chamois, which we have used to erase some things. You can use your stump or your Titilian. I can't find mine. That's the, oh, this. You can blend things like this, but I really want to encourage you at this early stage only to work additively, and it helps you learn control over the materials a little bit better and the visual space as you're building. We can manipulate and move things around later, but typically a more sophisticated drawing that is not smudged. So now, instead of smudging it with a tool, I'm using the pressure of my hand to feather out this information. I'm going to switch to my vine charcoal because it's softer and a lot lighter, and I just want a little bit of pigment to make this not look like paper, but to make it look like a table or the air that it's sitting in. So you can see, without even drawing the ball itself, I already have it setting up a figure and a ground relationship where it looks like it's sitting in space. So now I'm going to carefully go in and try to render the ball. So as you saw in the reading, we want to make something look like it has a highlight, a light, a shadow, a core shadow, and a cast shadow. So I'm going to act like my light source is coming from over here and then kind of figure out, again, these are make-believe, where some of these transitions and these shifts will go. I'll put some pictures in for you that you can use kind of as a template. But you can even see where I just sketched in those little marks that I'm using contour to try and help show where and how the form shifts. And here we go. If you did the reading and you read about some of the vocabulary, you saw the word chiaroscuro, and that's where something starts to emerge into light out of the dark. So I'm trying to kind of lose this edge here. I'm gonna knock off the charcoal. So it has a little drama. I'm gonna shift to my vine charcoal again because it's a little lighter and a little softer. And I'm barely skating on the surface. And it's starting to feel like it has form and space. So this could be done, like we could keep it just like this, but I am gonna come in and show you a little bit about how we can manipulate it if we go in with our other tools. So I think you have a plastic white Mars eraser. So I'm going to try and act like I'm using this pigment as a, almost like I'm sculpting it, like I'm moving it around where I want it to go. So I'm using a kind of round mark, going in circles. I don't really want to go in a cross-hatching mark right now. And I want to make sure I don't just go in a circle, because if I keep going in a circle, it's going to reinforce that that is a flat shape. So it's like I'm using this rounded technique with the eraser to kind of move some of that pigment. I'm leaving a little highlight to roll there. And so I'm not erasing it, I'm just using it as a way to like push the pigment kind of into the tooth of the paper. Also in the vocabulary in this lesson, it talked about the word sfumato, which is like a smoky haze. I run my eraser kind of over the shadow and into the sphere, so that I don't leave any like little outlines or highlights. I do like that little highlight there. I like that this dark line comes down a bit, but then disappears. So this is what I've talked about several times, but haven't really fully explained. I would call this a closed edge, where you can see a little bit of line, and then where it opens and you don't see the line. So it's like a delicate balance between having it have an edge and not have an edge. So it's starting to come together. It looks like I kind of squished it a little bit here, or I don't have enough here. So here's where I'm going to come in with my charcoal pencil. I'm going to use my soft. I'm going to sharpen it. If your pencils are breaking, then you can use a razor knife to sharpen them. These can be really fragile sometimes. And I just want to kind of reshape here. Sometimes when we start to add value, that's when things can get kind of squishy or weird. I'm trying to pull that little dark outline out, and I'm floating that charcoal pencil over the top of the old material that's already down. So you can kind of see this edge here. I'm gonna add a little more mark making, just to kind of give it a little space. I might make it a little darker over here. I think I'm going to use my vine. And there you go. So again, if you really wanted it to look like a shiny marble, that would be where you could go in and kind of manipulate and slow things down with an eraser, or you can kind of slow things down with a chamois. But really the key is not to overwork them. When they get overworked, they can look kind of ick. And if you want to practice with these and push the mark making slower, then it's always a good idea to work back over it with some more additive marks so it feels like it was intentional. Okay, I think I'm going to turn off the video, and I'll be right back, and I'll do our cube, our pyramid, and our cylinder on separate ones so that you can break up the watching. Okay, I will be right back.